to our correspondents, Siddhant Sibal, who's joining us from the Parliament right here in the national capital, New Delhi. Siddhant, first of all, of course, the last visuals we saw was of the Finance Minister with the red tablet. Talk to us about what's the mood over there where you are and what are the expectations?
Well, I'm standing just near the Parliament. There's cacophony of the media present, and of course the vehicles of the leaders entering the Parliament. We saw recently, just a few minutes ago, the Indian Prime Minister's motorcade reaching the Parliament. Now, a lot of expectations from this year's budget. This is the 7th budget of Nirmala Sitharaman as Finance Minister. This is the first budget under the third term of the Modi government. And there are a lot of expectations, whether it will be a political budget or whether it will be a populist budget. But one thing is for sure, that this budget will be significant in terms of announcements. Announcements, as of now, nobody knows, but it's given that there will be announcements given how the Prime Minister, in his remarks ahead of the session, the opening session of the budget session of the Indian Parliament yesterday, said that this year's budget will be a budget that will give direction to Viksit Bharat, to Amrit Kal. That's a time period of 25 years till 2047. So that remains the focus, whether it is creating more jobs, whether there is relaxation for the middle class in terms of the tax slabs, or whether it is the support for countries in the region. One thing that has been significant in Indian budget has been announcements in terms of grants, loans and financial assistance for countries in the region, from Bhutan to Maldives, from Afghanistan to Sri Lanka, Mauritius, Seychelles, Latin America, Africa. So that will be closely watched, and we know a lion's share always goes to Bhutan, but we know India has been supporting Sri Lanka in its dire needs with a support of almost $4 billion during the economic crisis. So all these numbers will be closely watched here, not only in India, but also in the region.
All right, Siddhant, thanks for getting us the latest. Of course, this is the monsoon session. I'm sure it's a humid morning for you as well, as you're there outside the Parliament. But we will be tracking the latest through the course of the day with you. As of now, I'd like to shift focus to Disha Shah, who's joining us from the Bombay Stock Exchange in Mumbai, of course, the financial capital. That is where the maximum buzz is what we're going to be hearing through the course of the day after the budget is announced. Disha, give us a sense of what kind of a mood you're looking at around you. And I know you've been talking to a lot of people, so give us the latest on that.
Well, absolutely. I'm here right outside the Bombay Stock Exchange in Mumbai, and we would want to show you. Right now it's pretty much silent, but because everyone is awaiting the budget very closely, which will happen in a couple of minutes. But right after the budget, this entire place it will be crowded, it will buzz, and it will be about what, how the budget was. So the markets also opened in the green today ahead of the union budget, and every year it's like, for a common man, what's in store. So we have a citizen with us who can really talk about what they are expecting out of the budget this year. Thank you so much for speaking to us on our channel. So what are your big expectations from today's budget?
The big expectations, like we spoke earlier, the tax benefits. Today, a person who is earning his salary is spending almost 1/3 of his salary towards payments of taxes. So keeping those people in mind, so that they do not have to struggle, few benefits of the old regime that were under Chapter 6A to be given out to the salaried man, so he can cover his housing loans, as well as if taken any loan for the education of the child. Education is one of the main and key factors required today to develop a skill set, and that helps to develop employment and generate a better economy in the right direction.
Right. In terms of other sectors also, because just before this live, we were also talking about how majority of the progress is needed in the other sectors like education, infrastructure as well.
Basically, India, we are an agricultural state. The very best symbolic representation of agriculture in India is the green carpet that is laid down in our Lok Sabha. So that, keeping that in mind, we must go pro-agriculture at the same time. A rural development, infrastructure in rural, that is healthcare, education, is also going to boost our economy in the right direction, as majority of our population still live in the rural areas.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, Shivin, this is a very correct and a very right point here, because every budget, a common man expects, to have some relief in the income tax slabs.
Yes.
There should be some progress in terms of infrastructure or development in the rural areas, because even today, more than 40% of the people live in the rural areas. So, this is something which everybody expects, and even a common man, like you heard him talking about, having a relief even for the senior citizens as well.
Thanks, Disha, for getting us the latest. And of course, this is essentially the viewpoint of the common man. We're expecting some kind of a difference in the tax slabs. That remains to be seen what happens. We'll know moments from now. Siddhant, I'd like to just quickly come back to you. As far as the geopolitical tensions which have been there across the previous, nearly 2 years, India has fairly withered that storm without, being affected directly or as badly as most other nations have. Here on forward, of course, it's a new government in India. There is going to be a new government in the US very soon. Talk to us about what this budget can perhaps do again, or what one is expecting, so that that storm is withered yet again. India continues to stay away from the geopolitical tensions.
Well, in terms of geopolitics, there is always an angle in the budget, and in this year's budget as well, numbers will be closely watched when it comes to the defense sector. India has been increasing its defense budget, but of course, it remains far lower than neighboring China, which is India's biggest security concern. But if we look at what to expect in the budget from the statements made in the economic survey, several things stand out. The economic survey essentially saying that India should be part of the supply chains with China. India, of course, should allow FDI from China. And these are very significant statements. There was almost mention of China 130 times in the economic survey. This is a departure from what the Indian government has been saying since the Galwan incident. We saw that the relationship has been going in a downward spiral. But essentially, what has been the demand of the businesses is that there should be a relaxation when it comes to visa norms for the Chinese, so that investments can come, so that FDI can come. And this is something that will require policy call. So will there be a policy decision made in next few days? Taking the advice from the economic survey is something that will be, of course, closely watched. But essentially, the Indian budget is something that will have its own angle when it comes to the strategic affairs, the concerns India has, the two-front war, in fact, 2.5 front war, which can be expanded into 3.5 front war with the maritime domain as well, is something that will be on the top of the minds of the policymakers.
All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for getting us the latest. That was Siddhant Sibal joining us from outside the Parliament in New Delhi, and Disha Shah getting us the latest from the Bombay Stock Exchange. She's there in Mumbai. Of course, both of them will be with us through the course of the day, getting us the latest. Thank you so much for joining in. I'd like to now come back to Mr. Vasudev, who's here with us in the studio. Sir, you heard what Siddhant just mentioned about, how India's stance on China, or I would say at least the mention of China, has had a major role in the economic survey, that they are wanting to invite FDI from China. And of course, do you find that to be a pivot shift from the way it was going till now since Galwan?
Well, it's a very interesting thought which the economic survey has given.
Yes.
After all, China is our largest trading partner in the sense, though of course it is heavily skewed in favor of China. We are importing a lot of stuff from China, consumer goods and intermediate products and raw materials and all that. So I think the idea that instead of importing stuff from China, if we encourage foreign direct investment of Chinese companies in India, maybe we'll be creating jobs in India, and that may be better than importing from China. It's a very interesting thought, but I think government will have to think it through, taking into account the geopolitical implications and all that. Purely, I think from the economic point of view, what the economic survey has suggested seems to make a lot of sense.
Sir, what measures do you feel are expected to boost consumer spending at this point? Of course, that is again something which at least the regular, a commoner would be looking out for at this point, that, what things become more expensive, what things become cheaper. That's mostly what everyone is discussing in every household.
Yeah, consumer spending, of course, people are saying that if there is more money is put in the pockets of the people through tax concession and all, it will boost. But I think ultimately it is the rural economy which can provide the consumer spending. And if there is growth in the rural sector, if there is growth in the agri sector, then all the FMCG and other companies will pick up, and that's a chain reaction after that. So one has to really focus, I suppose the government has to focus on how to increase the consumption in rural areas, how to increase the capacity to spend in rural areas by encouraging rural growth, by putting more money in the hands of the people in the rural areas, by giving more emphasis or incentives to agriculture, giving more incentive to agri-based industries, which are all in the semi-rural areas. So those types of incentives, I suppose, will give a bigger boost to consumption rather than tinkering with the budget, with the tax slabs, which may give a little bit of a boost to middle class, but that won't count for much.
So when you started, you said that this budget is coming in the backdrop of a weaker mandate with which this government has come back to power. I just want to kind of come back to that point, stemming from the fact that, of course, we all know how the election results were. Coming from that, do you feel this budget or this government will be able to draw some kind of a balance between reforms and giving out a populist budget?
Well, that is what one has to really look for in the budget. As I said, going by the last 4-5 budgets, they have stuck to the fiscal prudence route and not being overly populist, but certainly they have to read the signals which they have got through the elections. And it is mainly the employment, the joblessness, and rural distress and the agri distress. These are the 3 areas in which there are lessons for the government from the elections. And I do hope a lot of things to say on that in the budget speech, but how much of that will be in the substance of the budget numbers, that remains to be seen.
Very quickly, I'd like to slip in one more question before we slip into a break, sir. How do you feel the government can revive private investments?
Well, as you know, I think the numbers in the economic survey also indicate there are already green shoots in that area. Private investment is picking up. And one hopes that as the growth momentum picks up, there is more stability and there is more demand in rural areas, the investment will pick up. But still, I think they are working to 70% or 75% of the capacity. But there are green shoots which are a good sign.